And thank you very much for joining us here on PM Express. You may have noticed there's a big conversation happening as far as the education front is concerned, but it has something to do with diversity in our schools, religious diversity, that is. And the Wesley Girls School situation has thrown up a dilemma, but part of it is in court, part of it is also triggered a national soul searching, a national reflection on that particular subject. And what is it? That is the issue. This case has been filed in court, and this is Shafiq Osman versus Wesley Girls, and the timelines tell its own story. It was in 2024 that he went there at the Supreme Court, filed that Supreme Court case, and then you had the Attorney General fairly recently backing the Wesley Girls case. In other words, he was making the case for religious freedom, and that the Muslims in Wesley Girls should also be allowed to practice their religion freely. Attorney General came in with his own position on the matter, backing Wesley Girls. Then you have the Supreme Court directing Wesley Girls to file its response, which is standard practice. So really, what was he seeking? He wanted a ban on the Muslim practice lifted. And he says that was unconstitutional. So that presupposes then that there is a ban on Muslim practice in Wesley Girls. We'll get the Catholic Church to explain really what happens in Wesley Girls and other, faith-based senior high schools across the country. I went to one, St. Thomas Aquinas. It's a Catholic school. Wesley Girls isn't. It's Methodist. But in St. Thomas Aquinas, we had a mosque on the campus. And the Muslims joined us for Mass. Of course, needless to say, we did not join them for their prayers, but it was known that when it's time for them to pray, they go to their mosques on campus, and everything was fine. There was no issue at all. So I'm curious to know what the issue is with this ban, which is not subject of a court decision, a court litigation. Forced Methodist worship unlawful. He says he's asking the court to declare that they've been forced to worship within the Methodist tradition and the beliefs as espoused by the Methodist Church. And he says the Supreme Court must make a declaration that is indeed unlawful. They also want to believes that basically says they must have the guideline for school religion. Right, that must be clearly spelled out and regulated. So the Attorney General has to step in because, of course, the Attorney General has been sued. The Attorney General needs to put in a defense. And he says that Wesley Girls is not state-owned. And so, again, if it's state-owned, then, of course, we are a secular state, and you cannot impose one particular religion on the school funded with the taxpayers' money, right? So he says it's not state-owned, and the school retains the right to religious identity. That is the government position. That is the Attorney General's position. The state's position is what has been articulated there. But then you have the Catholic Bishops' Conference and the Christian Council also issuing a statement just yesterday. And this was a very strongly worded one, but nuanced in many aspects. And they were clear that the right to preserve Christian identity is something that they believe that they are entitled to, is a right of theirs also because they take care of the schools. The schools are part of their mission to proselytize. So it is not one that they set up necessarily to promote all other religions, but to promote the Christian faith. It's part of their proselytization mission. So that was a very interesting point, but just making it very clear that indeed coming to Wesley Girls or any other Christian faith-based school is a matter of choice. You know it's Wesley Girls, you know it's fundamentally Methodist. If indeed went to Aquinas, you know it is Catholic, and you chose to go there. And if you do, then you must observe the rubrics, the values, the religious practices there. And so they make the argument that if you have a unified culture, it ensures excellence. That at least is the Catholic Bishops' Conference, the Christian Council position on this matter. I know this is a very sensitive one, but this is we've come here before. This is not new. It's just been brought by because of the recent pronouncements, particularly also by the education minister who made this particular pronouncement that has generated controversy. that he says, we will not countenance any action by any person to deny any Ghanaian or girl the opportunity to profess or practice any religion. So that is the education minister weighing in on a very controversial subject, and he takes a position on the matter very clearly. But the Christian Council, the Catholic Bishops' Conference, they are not happy with his posture on this. And this position is one that has been canvassed before, but we found some consensus around, because there was this government to sister schools MOU that was signed. And I'll show you pretty shortly who signed it, because almost all the religious groups and representatives of those groups came together to sign this particular MOU. The last time this matter became a national topical issue. And they agreed on a host of things. One was the religious diversity is accepted, right? And that in our schools we'll promote that diversity. So that was the first principal pillar of that MOU. So diversity, as in if it's just Islam, you accept it. If it's Christian, the African traditional religion, we'll have religious diversity in our schools. So they agreed to do so. So then the question then must be asked, why then is Wesley Girls saying that you have to, to a particular religious line when there should be diversity as the MOU articulates? And then you also agreed that students must conform to school's values. So yes, conform. We will tolerate your religion, but you must also conform to the school's set values whilst you're there. So for example, at Aquinas, they also attended the mass, because that's part of the value, and in fact that's where assembly happens for everybody else. And then thirdly, that prior permission is required before fasting. And remember that the Islamic religion believes that during a particular period in the year you will fast. It's part of what they believe in. Christians also have that, but in Islam it's said you have a set period when this happens, and the students do so. But they agreed in that MOU that you need prior permission. Why is that even necessary? If I'm fasting, what has that got to do with the school? I mean, most often than not, people fast. You won't even know it unless I tell you that I'm fasting. So again, that was a curious one, but it was in the MOU, right? That was signed. And then you have a fourth one, a provision of worship space for diverse religions. I told you about what happened in Aquinas, which is that they have a Muslim space, which is a mosque, and then we had the chapel for Christians coexisting in the same space. And this is part of the MOU that was signed. And so I wonder whether in Wesley Girls they have one in keeping with the terms of the MOU. But if you look at those who signed, you have the Ahmadiyya Muslim Mission signing, the AME's Zion Church signed, Anglican Church signed, Assemblies of God, the Ghana Baptist Church signed. You have the Garrison Police Education. So this is a host of institutions representing various denominations as far as religion is concerned, signed onto this particular document for implementation. We've had civil society weighing on this, and Kofi Asare himself will join me. He doesn't see the point why somebody's fasting or prayer should affect education necessarily. He says, what harm would that really cause? You'll join me to expand on his thoughts. But all views will be represented in this particular conversation. Stay with me here on PM Express. As here on PM Express, it's a really sensitive conversation, but one that we've had before as a country. And I was just making the point before we came on air that I believe this is also another example of the Ghanaian tolerance, religious tolerance, and how as a country, regardless of religion, creed, we always find the middle ground. And the testament to that, the evidence of that is in that MOU that was signed, where all the religions came together and signed this very fantastic MOU, which has been at the bedrock, at the heart of collaboration in our schools. And it's come up again, I guess, an opportunity to further entrench that position and to see how do we deal with this more fundamentally. So we will put together a panel that will help us navigate this, looking back on the history that we have coming into this latest controversy. PMS is always brought to you by Syntax Tanks. It is strong, it is tough. Academic Times, Pepsodent, Community Fighter. Use that before you sleep tonight. In Ghana, if you're talking tanks, then you want to look for the tortoise on that storage tank, because it's simple. If you don't have it there, then it's not durable. It's not the correct tank. You need that to then tell yourself that you're dealing with Syntex tanks, the champion of water tanks. You can find them across the country. It is strong. It is tough. And Pepsodent Cavity Fighter is one I recommend to you also before you take your sleep tonight. Use it. And it is what guarantees you stronger teeth. My guest joining me for this all-important conversation are Reverend Father Michael Kwaku. He is a Director for Governance, Justice and Peace at the Ghana Catholic Bishops' Conference. They issued a statement yesterday, very, very detailed statement. It makes for very interesting reading. I encourage you to find it on myjoyonline.com and read the full text. He's here to expand on that for us. Kofi Asare is Executive Director of the Africa Education Watch. He's also had a few things to say about this. Daniel Fenyi speaks for the Ghana Education Service and joins us because the schools are fundamentally under their care. But we'll find very shortly that very interesting relationship that exists between the schools and the government. He will explain pretty shortly. Abdul Hamid Isalari is the Executive Director of the Zongo Institute for Development. They also issued a statement on this very matter. Thank you, gentlemen, for your time here on PM Express. I want to go to the heart of this, and I want to start by understanding what really the practice is at Wesley Girls, which keeps coming up. Reverend, yesterday the Catholic Bishops' Conference issued this very detailed statement analyzing the real fundamental issues around this topic. But let's start with what triggered this. This is Wesley Girls. What do you understand is really the issue there that is causing so much controversy?
Well, to the best of my knowledge, the issue is about a Muslim girl who, in wanting to express or live out her faith in a particular way at a particular time during the school term, encountered difficulty with the school authority. In a nutshell, that's what I'll say the issue was, and this has sort of gone on and escalated. Now we find it in court. Okay. But I think that I think we need to couch the whole conversation in the proper setting in order that we don't conflate issues or derail the whole discourse into where it does not belong.
Yeah, give me a second there. I know we also have Larry on the line. It's still not just on that specific matter, so that we can understand the specific before we broaden it, and I'll come to the key big issues shortly. But Larry, yesterday you also issued a statement. I know you've been interacting with your groups within the various schools. On the Wesley Girls School, what has been your brief? Hello, Larry, please unmute for me.
Just a moment. Okay. Thank you very much. Yes, we have been having interactions, and so far the mood in the school is calm.
But what really first introduced the tension?
Okay. As Muslims, wherever we find ourselves, we always want to be able to practice our religion, and so to other religious bodies. So a student, not only one person, there were a couple of students who were fasting during the fasting period. They were told they can't fast within that period. And also, they were also stopped from offering the 5 daily prayers. They were also prevented from wearing their hijab. And all these culminated together to bring out this issue. And our brother Shafiq Osman came up with a legal suit trying to address this issue. So the rationale behind all these issues we are having has to do with students being prevented. It's not only one person. If it was just only one person, we would have just limited ourselves. But it's not only one person, because fasting is done by Muslims, not only one Muslim during the Ramadan. And prayers is not only offered by one person. Same to the hijab. So it is a decision the school took when it came to the aspect of practicing their religion.
So that's a specific case. That's a specific case of Wesley Girls. Do you find this playing out in other faith-based schools, as in Christian senior high schools across the country, or is this an isolated Wesley Girls only issue?
Earlier, we were getting some of these issues, but when we confront the authorities as Ghana Muslim Student Association and other Islamic bodies, we are able to resolve the issues. Okay. But this particular Wesley Girls, there are other Methodist schools that don't have similar problem, like Methodist Girls in Eastern Region. Mm-hmm. That school has a special arrangement they do for the Muslims during the fasting, to the extent that they keep their food for morning, afternoon, and evening. And in the evening, all the Muslim girls come to the dormitory, set a table for them to break their fasts. That is a Methodist school. So if we find this similar situation the opposite way, where there are Muslims in Wesley Girls and they are told they can't fast during the month of Ramadan, it doesn't speak well. And this is a public institution, for crying out loud.
Okay, so we'll come to that. We'll come to the subject of the public institution. That in itself is a contested issue. Reverend, let me come back to you. You were going to expand on this. Yes. So now we understand what the specific issue is. But you said there are bigger, more complex issues at play here. Yes,
well, I think there are fundamental issues. So we are dealing with issues of people's rights, the students who are Muslims or not Muslims, and then the rights of the institution itself as such, but also the rights of the faith bodies which establish them. Which establish them with a particular intention in mind, with a particular ethos that was what is supposed to guide them, and all of which are also protected by the law itself. Now, when there is what I would call the clash of rights, or if you want, the understandings of the rights and how they must play out, if it happens, I think that we ought to be one, honest. Two, we ought to be accommodating from all sides. So I wouldn't. For instance, I mean, my brother said that Muslims fast. Well, he knows that it is not only Muslims who fast. Mm-hmm. Christians do fast, and it's not for us. For instance, Catholics. We fast during, the period of Lent. It's a 40-day fast. And we have students in our schools and elsewhere. So we ought to be able to come round the table of conversation to say, well, how can this be done? Can it be done? If it can be done, how? So I would rather take the posturing of trying to mediate, rather than to be insistent on one hand to say, well, it's a public school, it's not a public school, because once we get into that conversation, then the institutions that establish the schools will assert their rights and say, well, this is the reason why we set it. We set them up, and we set them up with these rules, and then you made a choice by coming to the schools fully aware of ABC. But as my brother said, is it possible that some concessions can be made? But I think it all boils down to the posturing with which it is done. Mm. I particularly find this conversation difficult because a good number of my friends are Muslims. Yeah. I mean, look, Sheikh Arimiyah comes to mind, Sheikh Zachary in Tamale, Hajja Hanatu. I deal with them personally and professionally. Mm. And I shudder to think that any of them, these fine men and women, would say that it is the official position of our brothers and sisters, Muslims, that they would not, or they would contest a particular sort of a set of bylaws of a school. I'd want to think that it is the contention of, say, a set of parents or a particular parent, I mean, that conversation will be had. But I don't want to think that it is the official position of our Islamic brothers and sisters, because I can't think of one of these men and women I've mentioned who would think that, you know, a posturing of, you know, such adversarial, dealing with the matter is the way to go. So I'd want this national discourse to take into consideration, first and foremost, the national sense of cohesion, of peaceful coexistence, of tolerance, because otherwise we will set ourselves against each other.
Yeah, and on that point, I want to bring in Kofi Asare. Kofi, this is a matter that has become one for your agency to look at. Also because it's not entirely new. We've been this way before. But what are the issues that really keep bringing this up? What from your understanding? And I was asking the question earlier, Wesley Girls always comes up, but when I asked the question of Larry, it appears this is an isolated issue. So what is the issue here?
Yeah. Yes. Good evening to your audience and my fellow panelists. Yes, it appears to be an isolated issue, but even if you understand the context within which the arguments being made by the Attorney General and then the Christian Council and then Catholic bishops, you realize that it is not just a Wesley Girls issue. The context goes beyond Wesley Girls. If you take time and read the statement that was issued yesterday by the revered bishops and then the Christian Council, you get a feeling that, not a feeling, it is obvious that in simple terms, we formed this school with the aim of propagating our religion.
Yeah.
And that it was our understanding that as part of getting people to participate in to join our religion, people will come to this school and then we will make our religion attractive to them so that they will be part of us. And so it is not our original intention to allow you to enter and come and do what you want. If you read the statement, that is in essence what they are saying.
Yeah.
But you see, that is where the issue is. It's not just Wesley Girls. The issue is that even though majority of our senior high schools, majority of our Christian senior high schools have always allowed Muslims to pray, the impression is being created by these statements and the arguments that we are actually moving towards an era where we will allow what we have allowed to happen for decades to continue to happen. Because an issue happens in one school, and we're having statements that go to the core of why we will not even allow, or why we will not even allow what is currently being enjoyed by way of religious right to continue. And so it's a fundamental issue of the enjoyance of religious rights in mission schools and not Wesley Girls. And Evans, I want to say one thing, that in all this, let's avert our minds to one fact, that we agree that religious rights are fundamental rights. And Constitution, international frameworks provide such rights. Now, there are two major principles that govern the exercise of religious rights in this world. Two major principles. The first is the principle of non-discrimination. And the principle of non-discrimination simply says that no person shall be treated, differently, because of their religion or their religious beliefs. And that everyone must enjoy equal rights when it comes to their access to their religious faith. And if you read Article 17 of our Constitution, it's clear that our Constitution prohibits discrimination on grounds of, among others, religion. 21 thereabout, makes it also clear that there is a guarantee for religious freedom. Now, the second most important one is the principle of non-compulsion. Because the argument that I established a school with the aim of quote unquote, getting you to attend and convert you or get you to buy into my religion. And so once you arrive there and I allow you to manifest your religion, then I'm not achieving my end, flies on the face of the principle of non-compulsion.
But Kofi, what also about the principle? What about the principle that the Catholic Bishops' Conference and the Christian Council articulated in their statement yesterday about the power of choice? And one making a very deliberate decision that it is the Christian school that I want to take my child, although I know I don't belong to that faith, and that it is a voluntary action that one takes. So it's inherent in there, their suggestion that once you make that decision, you are then agreeing to comply with the rules and the values.
The power of choice cannot override constitutionally guaranteed rights. The power of choice cannot override, an institution's power of choice cannot override constitutionally guaranteed rights, because the principle of non-compulsion simply says that no one should be forced to practice another religion or stop practicing their religion. And so immediately you ask someone to practice my religion or manifest my religious belief, or you ask that person to stop practicing or manifesting their religious belief because they are participating in a public social activity, then you are breaching the principle of non-compulsion. Whether you are doing it because you think you have the right to choice or not is another matter. But what I'm saying is that the right to choice cannot override fundamental constitutionally guaranteed rights to freedom of religion, which are anchored on two major principles: the principle of non-compulsion and the principle of non-discrimination. And so what we are discussing is that we are actually discussing the possibility of discriminating against some people because they will be treated differently simply because they're in a particular school.
Yeah, and Kofi, hold on for a second. Reverend, address that for me. Yesterday, you in your statement, it was detailed because I see that you anticipated the argument. Kofi's point is the constitutional point. Yesterday, you argued that your stance on the matter is also constitutional. How do you square that circle?
I'm afraid my brother Kofi would have to articulate the problem we have a bit better. I don't think that there's any point in the statement that we said that our aim for setting up the school was to proselytize or to force people to, as it were, become Christians. Not
force,
yes.
But there definitely was allowed, pull it up and read the exact words. There's a line there, paragraph, that articulates that when we set the schools up, it was in furtherance of our Christian faith.
Exactly. Well, but of course, but in furtherance of the Christian faith, it does not merely mean that we do that so that anyone who comes there becomes converted or proselytized. It is to, as it were, uphold those principles which are Christian and which over the years have. Look, as I say, I'll be surprised. I'll be surprised to hear from anybody who has been to any of these mission schools and says they were forced to become Christians. Because I have taught briefly in St. Augustine's College,
yeah.
and St. Augustine's College is owned by the Catholic Church. A place of worship is provided for our Christian sons who study there. So the claim that these missions have established this church, the schools merely to proselytize or to force anybody is very far from the truth. What we have said is to further further our faith. I mean, if anybody comes there and they feel that, because of the principles they've seen, they want to convert, that is fair. But we haven't said anywhere that anyone who comes there is going to be either, coaxed or coerced to become a Christian. So we should set that clear.
I want to quote the exact words so that it sort of puts it in context.
Yes.
It says, our historical and proprietorship claim forms the cornerstone of our argument.
Yes.
Christian mission schools were not created by the state.
Yes.
They arose because of the different churches, Catholic, Methodist, Presbyterian, Anglican, and others, saw education as a central expression of our missionary mandate.
Exactly.
And the missionary mandate is to preach Jesus.
So the point is that, that's the point I've made, that you see, there's a difference between a positive act to intentionally, as it were, force people to become Christian, and an offer, the right to offer this in education, in health, and all of that. And you could take the education and say, well, I like the education, I like the principles, I don't want to be Catholic. And there are many who have done that. There are those who would use our hospitals and say, well, our hospitals have treated us well and all of that. They have no intention of becoming Christians, and no one has even dared, has had the temerity to say, well, you have to become this. So as I'm saying, it's almost unkind to insinuate that the point that the Christian churches are making, or the Bishops' Conference and the Christian Council are making, is that we want to have the right to turn everybody who comes there into Christians. What we have said is that we have a right to exist, to celebrate what we believe in, but also establish schools to further our faith, but also make it available for national growth and development.
So then how do you address the Larry's concern that in the specific case, and I think we all agree that this has now become, it's isolated.
Yes.
I mean, Kofi Asare makes a point, you've made a point, he makes a point, he himself admits that this is isolated. But in the specific case of Wesley Girls, how do you then justify the ban on fasting? And then he says they want a place to worship, and that in itself, the 5 times prayers again has become an issue. But that's how do you
well,
justify
I think that would have to go to the schools particular bylaws.
But this is not a bylaw issue. I mean, that's Kofi Asare's point, that this is a human rights constitutional matter.
Well, we'll get into that.
But then that's where he says discrimination.
I don't know whether Kofi Asare is a lawyer. I'm a student of law.
I'm not. I doubt he is.
So that is why I want to be.
But it's the most basic of rights, right? You don't need to be.
Well, but the question is this. I mean, yes, you have a right to be Catholic. You have a right to be Muslim. But you don't have a right to be Catholic in a mosque when Muslims are praying, and to claim, what? So what I mean is that those rights are guided when as I say, when there are conflicts, when those rights come to head. Yeah. That is when we say, okay, where does this actually stand? There's a how about law. There's a how about rights. So the fact that you have a right to exercise your religion does not mean that wherever you go and at whatever instance you should be able to do it exactly the way you want to do. I mean, there were times that I when I used to work at the UN, had to travel to places where my brothers and sisters Muslims were. I couldn't exercise my right as a Christian the way I would have done in Ghana or in the United States.
Yeah.
So all I'm trying to say is that there are ways of having the conversation in such a way that it doesn't appear that if it has to be, if the exercise has to be, say, altered because of a particular other legitimate reason, then that is interpreted as, a direct and an intentional violation of another person's right, because it can be situational. We can make instances where the whole thing will fall into absurdity, but that is not what is necessary. What I'm saying is that if the person has freely chosen to go to this school, knowing fully well that this is what is there, but there is a challenge, it is a conversation that has to be had. We shouldn't go straight away into accusations of intolerance or a desire to prevent people from exercising their right. I think then we take the conversation to where it does not belong.
Okay, let me get the Ghana Education Services point on this. And Fenyi is with me. He speaks for the GES. Fenyi, what is the Ghana Education Services policy on religious diversity and tolerance in our schools?
Thank you very much, Evans. And let me indicate that for us at Ghana Education Service, we are more interested in, one, providing quality education to all learners in Ghana. So that's our first preoccupation. Two, making sure all Ghanaian learners get access to education. So one, quality education. Two, access to education. Let me take you back to the time of placement, when we are placing our learners from the junior high school, after they are done with their BEC, to the senior high school. Their backgrounds in terms of religion, culture, ethnic biases, and all that do not play any role in the placement of these students. And so we go strictly by the schools they themselves have selected, the results or the aggregate they obtained, and we place them. In other words, religious biases and those distinctions play very minimal role in the quest for education and in the provision of education. So in terms of diversity, for us at Ghana Education Service, as an institution, we encourage it, we motivate it, we actually ensure that there's that level of diversity in any campus that you would enter, gender diversity, religious, cultural diversities, and all that, because we believe that the school environment, the classroom environment, predominantly is for academic business, but it's also to encourage peaceful coexistence, peaceful living together, fraternizing, and all that, because in any case, we are preparing our learners for the field of work. Yeah. And when they come to the field of work, they come to meet people from all walks of life, different beliefs, different orientations at the place of work.
And having articulated that, then, how then do you enforce that in a school like Wesley Girls, considering the complaints that had come forward, which is now a subject of a court action? How is the GES dealing with the Wesley Girls challenge?
All right, so there are two phases to this. The first phase is that when you enter the campus of Wesley Girls today, you would find students from all religious backgrounds, various religious backgrounds and orientations on the school premises, receiving education, receiving studies, learning, and working together and living peacefully. So that's the first phase. So on that score, we should admit that Wesley Girls fairly, to a very large extent, accept diversity, lives with diversity, and actually encourages diversity. So that's the first phase. The second phase is the physical expression of different religions. That's where now we see two different schools of thought. One school of thought believes that we start off the school as a mission school. And so when you enter the premise of the school, you should see signature of the missionary nature of the school. You should see it on the school premises, i.e. enforcement of some services, prayers, reading of scriptures, hymns, and all that. You may have to see it because they believe it is a signature, we'll call it signature tune of the school. And others interpret that as infringing on their right to religion. Another school of thought also believes that no, you may have set off as a missionary institution, but now you are a state institution, right? You are supported by the people's taxes.
But
you are supported by the state.
That is a controversial point.
Yeah.
Are they state institutions?
To the extent that the books they use, the curriculum they use, the teachers who teach the facilities that they have there are to a very large extent provided by the state. I mean, when you go there, the teachers who teach there are paid by the state. The curriculum they use from the state, the textbooks they use. So, of course, they are. It's a state institution. Let me limit it to the specific case of Wesley Girls. It's a state institution.
So respond and just a second on that. The Catholic Bishops' Conference statement yesterday and the Catholic Bishops and Chris, they addressed this point. This is what they said in that statement. They say that we acquired the land, and I'm quoting, we acquired the land, built the school, trained the teachers, and shaped the ethos long before the modern state of Ghana existed. When the government began assisting us, primarily by paying teacher salaries and regulating curricula, it joined an already functioning system. State support, therefore, is a partnership, not a takeover. The ownership and identity of these schools reside with us. How do you respond to that?
Yes, let me make it simpler for us. Wesley Girls is not a private senior high school. Let's establish that. So that would be the response. And so a school of thought believes that learners who get into the institution, whichever background, religious background they are coming from, should be allowed to express themselves. For the nuanced case of whether, yes, the physical expression of individual religions should be allowed on such a mission school premise, I believe that's where the courts come in. And so forgive me if I'm limited in terms of getting into the technicalities and the nuances. But these are the thriving schools of thought regarding missionary institutions and to what extent learners from different religious backgrounds can practice their religions. But as I indicated, Wesley Girls is not a private senior high school. I don't know however phrase you would want to describe it, but it's not a private school. It's a state institution, and so a lot of the things they do, a lot of the activities, the teachers, the curriculum, as I mentioned, are very much within the confines of the state. And so we believe and we would encourage that, frankly, already there's diversity on the campus. When you go to Wesley Girls campus today, you will find Muslims there, you will find Christians there, you will find Christians who are not Methodists on the campus, who are receiving their studies. No one is disturbing them. We wish that that level of peaceful coexistence will be there and will continue to be there.
Yeah. So
in terms of
who defines? And this is an important point too from the statement. Who defines the identity of the schools and the values that they espouse? Is it the GS, which of course is a state agent that supervises the schools, etc., or is it the religious organizations that set up the institution?
Let's do a bit of historical background. We should accept that generally the schools in Ghana, even from basic schools, we have secular or liberal institutions, and we have missionary or mission schools. When we mention a mission school, it means that historically it started with the church started it, the church funded it, the church drew their vision, their mission for the school. The church, as Wesley Girls case, the land was procured by the church and all that. So the church plays a very significant role. In fact, we should even admit that they founded these institutions. And so the mission, the vision, the ethos, the practices, belief systems, prayer sessions, activities done on campuses and all that, largely were even there before the state came in. And to a very large extent, the state, you don't break what works. The state, realizing that a lot of these practices really work, produces positive outcomes, will not want to necessarily break into the already existing positive practices of these schools. So for missionary schools, they have very strong historical connection with the churches. And so a lot of their practices are influenced. A lot of their practices were actually crafted by these denominations. And once it works, you don't go in as a state and just break down what is already working.
Fanny, hold on for me. Let me bring in Larry. Larry, that is the GES position on the matter. He believes it's their state schools. The Catholic Bishops' Conference and the Christian Council believe it isn't. It is at best state assisted, and they still own the schools in essence. So the question then to you is, to the point that they make, that this is a choice you've made to come to the school, knowing very well that it is Methodist, it is Catholic, etc., etc. And so you must be prepared to comply with his ethos, values, and religious practices. So how do you respond to that?
So far, I attended a Catholic school, St. Thomas Aquinas.
Oh, so you're an Otom?
I'm an Otom.
You must have heard me make the point that in Aquinas, we have a mosque on campus.
Exactly. The interesting part is that during our time, the parish hall is where the Muslims organize their Jimsa programs. When there is an Islamic program and in school, we need a space to organize the program. We are giving the parish hall to organize it. They are also Christians. That is the religious tolerance that is in the MOU that was signed. So we've lived in several mission schools. This particular one by Wesley Girls, they have taken an entrenched position. That is why it has left the shores of Wesley Girls and is in the courts. If all the issues we've been facing as Ghana Muslim Students Association and some of the stakeholders, when there are issues like this, we visit the schools, we have a discussion. If there are some issues, we are able to amend it within a short time. We've lived peacefully with Christians. The Christians love Muslims, Muslims love Christians. But the particular institution, the institutional heads now at Wesley Girls are the ones taking the entrenched position. From what the education, Dr. Daniel Afeni is saying, Ghana Education Service has stated clearly that it's a public school. So whether they like it or not, it is a public school. Yes, it is accepted. They built it, but they've handed it over but they've taken some support from the Ghana Education Service. They've taken support from governments. This free SHS, every feeding that is given, it is given from the buffer stock. It's given from the state funds, the taxes Ghanaians pay. So every Muslim who has paid his tax would find himself in a school and cannot practice religion. We don't fight the rules. The students in Wesley Girls, they attend assembly. They go to the Sunday church. The Sunday church, they go. Because sometimes the Sunday, everybody's supposed to go, they go. But if you are denying them from practicing their own religion, that is the discrimination. That is where Article 21 subclause 1 and paragraph C talks about. Everybody should follow this particular rule. It is clear in the Constitution. So we don't know why Wesley Girls will take that entrenched position for us to get to the Supreme Court and it becomes a matter of law. Listen, this is clear. We are not fighting the Wesley Girls institution or Christians. We are not fighting them.
Absolutely.
It is only clear that the Muslim girl, the Muslim gentleman, the Muslim man or lady wants to find himself or herself in a school and practice his religion peacefully. Interestingly, over the years, all the other mission schools I've mentioned, as I said, a typical example is St. Thomas Aquinas, where I schooled for 3 years. It is clear, Reverend Bacha, Mr. Ababio, Sister Claudette, all these people show you love. They welcome you with open arms, give you all the support, to the extent that even Christian teachers are made patrons to join the Muslim Student Association. Christian teachers are made to become patrons. So there's that relationship between the schools we attended. As I give you a typical example of Methodist school in Eastern region, they have a system where they provide a special arrangement for the Muslim students. Are they not Christians? So the religious tolerance we are talking about is quite obvious that the entrenched position that has been taken is what we have a problem. Over the years, there are instances where Muslim students have been prevented from praying and all those things, and those issues have been addressed. Remember, Ghana has signed the Covenant of Civil Society Rights internationally. So by doing that, this single action of preventing a student from manifesting his religion, the students are not saying they want the whole space to come and pray their congregational prayer, or they want the teachers to leave for them to go and pray. That's not what they're asking. They are only saying that when we are doing these things, don't stop us. They are being stopped. They are being prevented.
Okay.
Fasting, if someone is sick,
let me put this quickly to Kofi Asare, and I'll take a quick break. Kofi, respond to that line that I put to Fain, the spokesperson for the GES, for me. The Catholic Bishops' Conference and Christian Council say, quote, the state support, therefore, is a partnership, not a takeover. The ownership and identity of these schools reside with us. Government assistance does not diminish the identity, nor does it confer the right to alter the core religious character that defines these institutions. You don't disagree, do
you? Yes, what they are saying is factual, but it still operates under an umbrella called policy and law. Yes, it is a fact that they established the school. Okay, that has not been in dispute, and so I actually wonder why we had to go there. But it's a fact that they are making a claim to ownership. It is undisputed. But the reality is that ownership is within the confines of law and policy. If you go to countries like France, secular countries like France, where religion is banned in schools since 1905 or so, because of the interest of the Catholic Church, to impose its religion on them, and being a multi-religious country. If you are running a school and it's not for government, you can't say that you won't respect the ban on religious activities in French schools. No, it's law, it is policy. So the point I want to make is that, yes, the schools belong to them. No one has disputed that. But the reality is that whether the schools belong to them or not, the schools are supposed to be operated under a constitution called the Ghanaian Constitution, and then a policy and law. And what is law? Prior to Achimota, Tyrone, Magai, and Achimota, there was no case law to properly provide the framework for implementing the manifestation and enjoyance of religious rights in schools. But since 2021, when that judgment was issued, we're clear in our minds that there was now case law. And the law is simply that you must allow, as much as practicable, the manifestation of one's religion, to the extent that that manifestation does not unduly disrupt the running of schools. And also, the law is clear that school rules are inferior to constitutional rights. It's clear in the judgment. And so if you are a law-abiding institution and you say that I own the school, but I will not respect this law, then you are not being law. Then you are not being a responsible citizen. Yeah. Because one of the responsibilities of a good citizen is to be law-abiding, and the law is clear. And so until a new law is established, okay, perhaps through the current case at the Supreme Court, which will end up overriding the Achimota judgment, if indeed there's a different judgment, or it may end up enforcing the interpretation that was, the judgment in Achimota. You can't say that you won't respect the law. Not respecting the law is not just unconstitutional or doesn't smack of irresponsible citizenship, but it is also unchristian. Because as Christians, we are taught and we learned to give what belongs to Caesar, etc. And so I think that if there's a law in the country, both constitution and case law, that is explicit that when it comes to the enjoyance and manifestation of constitutionally guaranteed rights, including religious rights, school rules are inferior to the constitutional provisions or provisions of law. We should just follow the law until there's a new law.
Until there's a new law. I'll take a break. When I return, I hear Reverend's take on. Okay, so we have an MOU in place that is supposed to hold, except that there's still concerns. Is it time to maybe review that MOU and strengthen it and bring more people to the table on discussing a permanent way to deal with this particular recurring issue? And then how is the GS itself using its influence to negotiate an outcome that everybody can accept that will put this to bed once and for all? And I beg the question, this will beg another question, which is the Supreme Court the right forum for this? Because you know the court system is adversarial and a decision will be made. One side will feel aggrieved, the other side. But in that context, what else can be done to negotiate an outcome that everybody feels they can own? I guess we'll weigh in on that after this. And thanks for staying with us. A big conversation around religious tolerance and diversity in our schools. And we have a conversation already about what pertains in Wesley Girls, but also across the country. It appears to be isolated, but it's still generating a fair bit of consternation and division in the country where we have strong religious ties and communion among all faiths. The big question then is, we currently have a solution. The solution that was tried and tested and has been there for a while is an MOU that was signed between the Christians and a host of other religions. The Muslims were also signatories to that. Is it that has become inadequate now? And is it time to review that? Reverend, what would you say? Should we, on the back of this latest conversation, seek to review the terms of that MOU? And a few of the key bullet points, just so that we have clarity on whether it's sufficient. One, the MOU said religious diversity is accepted, so there's acceptance of that. Students must conform to school's values, which was also part of the MOU. That the prior permission is required before you fast. so you need that. So it is not a prohibition, but you need prior permission. And then provision of worship space for diverse religions. In other words, you must provide, like Aquinas, provide a mosque for Muslims in the school to pray. Those were the terms in summary. Is this adequate, or is it time to review?
Before I come to that, there's a statement making the rounds in social media attributed to one Yusuf Abdul Ganinu Shola. If it indeed authored by him, I think he needs to be praised. Even if it is not authored by him, it is something that I think it's something that he, having followed him, on radio and those days on Deutsche Welle, that he would author, and he speaks about the question of facing this whole conversation with a huge modicum of honesty. And he says that whilst what we are looking for is acceptance and tolerance, we must ask ourselves, because of course he's Muslim, and he said, if we set up an Islamic school, will we not have limits? There would be limits. Does that limit amount to curtailing people's rights? No, it would be to present the possible limits within the confines both of the law, but also of the circumstance of the school to see what you can or cannot do, taking into consideration why we are all there. So we're not there basically to live out our faith and all that. We live out our faith, but also we are studying and all of that. So how do we manage all of that? The school, the institution that set them up, they have a right to be able to set that up. What I say, because I always want to sound a caution. What I don't want us to do is to bring the conversation to a point where our brothers and sisters, the Christians, will ask, when our sons and daughters go to Islamic schools, do they have the untrammeled right to exercise their faith the way they want?
What would you say, in the interest of time, is the sustainable solution to this? We have an MOU. Should we simply implement it?
Let us go to
or review it.
Let us. I don't know whether anybody is actually living out the MOU as it is now. Because if we had lived out the MOU, we would have seen challenges with it or not. I don't think that, because the MOU...
As it stands, is it adequate for you?
I think it's a good start. We can build
What else must happen?
I believe in living out what is established first. And then when the challenges come, we will deal with them.
Okay. Let me get Fenyi's point. Fenyi, how is the GS approaching tackling this in a more sustainable, permanent way? Because here's this Supreme Court case that's happening. The court will decide. Somebody will win, somebody will lose. But does it really fundamentally address the concerns in our schools, particularly Wesley Girls? How is the GS approaching this differently from a point of view of litigation? I know the Education Ministry is represented there by the Attorney General, but you need to ensure that the children are educated. You've made the point. Are you approaching this differently? Is there consultations happening?
Yes, Evans, I should admit that in terms of the legalities, it appears quite far advanced at the moment. And so, as you rightly mentioned, some of these things sometimes get a bit adversarial, and that's what we, as Ghana Education, would not happen, because, of course, the school environment, the learning environment should be very safe and sound for all our learners. So we wouldn't want a situation where one party feel aggrieved, but they are on the campus. Another party feels excited. They're also on the campus. By the time you realize there's a whole lot of tension and all that. So indeed, the existing MOU, which the Ghana Education Service rightly supported, endorsed, even co-signed and all that, we expect that enough sensitization and education will go out for all to understand that actually living peacefully, peaceful coexistence, working together, learning together, studying together is actually part of the education our children go to schools to seek. And so that level of sensitization you can trust that would go out. And you could also admit that religious tensions sometimes get quite disastrous. And so you wouldn't want to get to an angle where there seems to be very heavy religious tension, at least not on the school campuses, on the school premises, where in recent times, where there have been some tribal conflict in some areas, you would realize that some of the town folks even run to the school campuses, because they believe that when you enter a school campus, people cannot enter
it's a safe haven
and then harm you.
Yeah.
Yes, and so we believe that beyond academics, the school environment has so much to offer.
Okay.
And we may have to harness some of these.
So Fanny, I hear you say, as far as the GS is concerned, your primary interest is to enforce the MOU, but also extend education and further dissemination of that MOU among the schools. Is that fundamentally is your approach?
In fact, the approach is that even the MOU itself is not a policy to be enforced. It's an agreement made between all parties. So it's not as though some institution sat somewhere, crafted some policy and damned it on some.
So your approach is to say, implement what we agreed.
Yes, just work with what we have all sat down and agreed upon to work with. But again,
Kofi, very briefly, thank you. Kofi, very briefly, what would you say? This has come up again. What would you say will be the lasting way to deal with this? Or we have the MOU is enough? Or we should just implement it for the cutoff?
No, I don't see any commitment. We are just going in circles and then trying to, romance the stone. The reality is that there's an MOU that should have avoided the situation we have on our hands. Happy father, the respected father in the CDO is hailing the MOU as something that should promote or that should have resolved the situation we have on our hands. But we are here because Wesley Girls is not going according to the MOU. If Wesley Girls was going according to the MOU, no one will be in court. So we are trying to window dress the issue when we are failing to be honest. The honest truth is that the MOU has a solution. But we are here because the MOU has not been respected by Wesley Girls.
Okay, so in other words, enforce the MOU and simply abide by its terms. That's also
So we can't hail the MOU when the challenges we are facing today is a result of non-conformity with the MOU by Wesley Girls.
And Larry, you also agree the MOU is a solution and must simply be implemented.
It's the absolute solution. But I need to answer Reverend.
Very briefly in 30 seconds because I need to wrap up.
Reverend Michael should take note that we have the largest senior secondary school in Ghana. It's in Kumasi, and it's the Kumasi Islamic Senior High School. It's the largest. Has a population of 7,500 students. So Muslims have their institutions. So what Shola is saying, it is to tell you that we already have the institutions, and no Christians are allowed to practice their own religion in TI Ahmadiyya, in Islamic Senior High School. All of them had the chance to pray. Nobody is being forced. So if the MOU is being followed, tomorrow we'll have this. Wouldn't have been in court, as Mr. Asari is saying. It's a solution. We don't need to go through these processes.
Okay, so we have a solution. Don't reinvent the wheel.
And then we end it there.
Gentlemen, I'm grateful. So enforce that solution, which is the MOU. Across all schools, and GS says that is exactly what they plan to do now, extend and intensify the education around the MOU and enforcement. Enjoy the rest of your evening.